Hey everybody, it's X, and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today we're going to be playing another premiere draft of Murders at Karlov Manor. Without further ado, let's get into the Pack 1 Pick 1, where we basically have 4 equally powerful uncommons, really. All of these are fantastic cards. The rare, not so much. It's pretty difficult to cast, requiring triple blue, so you gotta be deep into the color, and it's kind of narrow, only copying something that was put into a graveyard this turn. So not a huge fan of that, but Perimeter Enforcer is great for blue-white detectives and solid in any white deck. Surveillance Monitor is good in any blue deck, giving you some nice blockers there. Long Goodbye is super efficient removal, and Reckless Detective is a great way to filter through your draws and find whatever you need in a more aggressive deck. Being able to filter through your draws just naturally while attacking is quite nice. So I'm going to go with Reckless Detective, but I think any of these 4 would be really nice ways to start off the draft. We do get rewarded a bit with our Pack 1 Pick 2, getting a Fugitive Codebreaker here. 2 mana, 2/1 Prowess Haste, already a solid stat line for an aggro deck, but if you draw it a little later in the game, you can play this face down, so that when you do flip it up for its disguise cost, you get to refuel, discard your hand to draw 3 new cards. So ideally, obviously, you do that once you are out of plays. So we'll take the Codebreaker here to go with our Reckless Detective. We've got a solid red start for now. Had we taken the White Detective uncommon, there's an Inside Source is a great follow-up. If we took the blue common, there's an Out Cold that's a great follow-up. There's several pretty solid cards in this pack. The Galvanize being another great one in red for just cheap removal, but I'll go for the rare here, pick up the Codebreaker. Pick number 3. Don't think we'll be taking another red card this time, with Gearbane Orangutan being pretty filler. That being said, there's not much that's actually good in this pack. Yeah, I actually don't really like any of these cards. Tracker's fine filler. Forum Familiar is pretty weak filler overall. Sudden Setback's fine, but I don't love just hopping into blue-red here for just a kind of okay blue card. And then Case of the Locked Hothouse does not seem good for green-red. So when you finally solve this and you have 7 lands on board, then it can be a good card draw engine, but that is pretty late in the game. I think I'm just going to take Elegant Parlor, just in case we end up in Boros, but we're not really getting much out of that pack. Pick number 4 now. I am actually a pretty big fan of Museum Night Watch. 4 mana for a 3/2 that replaces itself with a 2/2 when it trades off, so it's one of these 2-for-1 value plays. Kind of like 2 creatures off of 1 body, but you don't get to have them at the same time, so that's a little weaker than stuff like Inside Source, but it still plays pretty well. We could alternatively take Murder heading into black, or again, like Sudden Setback heading into blue, but it's just a little expensive for what it's doing, so I'm not in love with that card. I think it's really Murder or Museum Night Watch, and we'll go for the Museum Night Watch, and maybe we are Boros with this Elegant Parlor. Pick number 5, Shock. That is nice and late, and easily the pick, seeing as we are somewhat deep into red here. If Shock was not in the pack, Granite Witness is a great hybrid mana disguise card we could play in blue-red or red-white. And then Projector Inspector is pretty good for blue-white detectives. Not that likely to head that way, but in case we got like pushed off of red here, could be fine. Pick number 6. Again, not a lot going on here. I don't like the Orangutan, don't like the Demand Answer, so I guess I will take a Setback this time around. That's not a huge reason to hop towards blue, in my opinion. Pick 7, Unauthorized Exit is a decent bounce spell. Could take Informant just for filler in red, or Phantom or Case File Auditor for some filler out of white. Definitely need a good enchantment count for the Case File Auditor to be decent, but if you do manage to get multiple copies of the enchantment-based removal that white has, can actually be pretty good, because if it pulls out your 3 mana exile enchantment, that's a pretty great deal, even if you're never solving a case for it. So take the Auditor here. Pick 8, we're definitely not playing Kylox, so you need a ton of instant sorceries and a ton of creatures that are expendable to sack, and you need to make it to 7 mana. It just asks way too much from you. So I'll just take a Fester Leech here for a nice little aggro card if we end up in black-red. Pick number 9. Vigilante is actually pretty nice at the top of the curve for red-white decks, because a lot of your cheap creatures are going to be power 2 or less, so this does consistently get some counters on your board. So I like this over a fine blue piece of interaction. Pick 10, basically nothing playable. Pick 11, basically nothing playable. Setback is on that that mediocre borderline. Alright, pick 12. Tracker is certainly filler, but it is playable filler, as is the Braggart. And for pack 2, pick 1, we are basically definitely going to stick to red now, because that's a Krenko, Baron of Tin Street. 3 mana, 3/3 haste is already solid, but you can also tap it, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on each goblin you control, and whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can spend 1 red mana to get a 1/1 goblin. So every time you're sacrificing a clue, or your opponent is sacrificing a clue, or you're losing an artifact creature, or your opponent's losing an artifact creature, you're spitting out goblin tokens that then get buffed up by the ability. And if you sacrifice your own artifact to Krenko's ability, the triggered ability that lets you pay a red to make a 1/1 goblin will resolve before the +1/+1 counters go onto the board, so you'll actually get a 2/2 goblin out of that deal. So big fan of Krenko. Requires a little bit of work to build around, but a really fun, powerful card. If Krenko weren't there, there's actually a slight argument towards that green enchantment, the Among Us card, Killer Among Us, because it's just really good, and it's kind of splashable, a green and 4, but I'm pretty happy to take Krenko. Pack 2, pick 2, Makeshift Binding is very good removal. It's going to be able to clear out anything you need it to and gain you some life to win aggressive mirror matches. And it's also a removal spell we can pull out with our case file auditor. So I think we take Makeshift Binding here, but on the job's an incredible finisher for Boros aggro. Fuss and Bother is a really good flexible card for any white-based aggro deck, buffing your whole board or getting Thopters in the late game. So that's another great card. So it is a bit of a hard choice here, mainly between Binding and Fuss Bother, but I'm going to take the Binding here since we do have the case file auditor kind of leaning us towards picking up enchantments somewhat highly. Pick 3, Easy Inside Source to make our board state a little wider. It's exactly what Boros aggro wants to do in this format. Pack 2, pick 4, yet again, get that wide board state. Person of Interest is a 2/2 Menace and a 2/2 for 4 mana, so another card to spread out that board. Pick number 5, there's not a lot of really good 2-drops in this format, like Codebreaker and Detective, so Red Herring does go up in value in these aggressive decks, because you want to start your curve on turn 2 to try to outrace all the slower decks that are starting at turn 3 with face-down disguise cards. So Red Herring is actually a solid pickup, even though it's individually not the greatest card ever. Being able to fill out your mana curve is pretty nice, pretty important when you are aggressive. Pick number 6. I do think that the Absolving Lamassu is actually quite a bit of mana, not the greatest card ever, so I don't really want that at the 5-drop slot, especially when we already have 2 5-drops. So I'm a little interested in the Chases on. We don't have a ton of non-creature spells right now, and this does Investigate to give us that clue token to synergize with Krenko. Granite Witness would also be solid here, but I think I'm going to take the Chases on. Pick number 7, I actually do like Offender at Large quite a bit. 3 mana Disguise card that flips up for 5 to turn into a 5/4 that gives something +2/+0 till end of turn, so it's just a huge amount of surprise damage, and it gives your aggressive decks top end, it gives you a big 5-drop finisher that's still castable if you only have 3 mana, which is also pretty relevant, pretty important. You don't end up missing out on curving out on your opponent. If you have this in hand, you can still curve out with it on turn 3, so it's pretty nice. And I'm going to take a second copy here. Pick 9, second Griffknot Tracker or second Chases on. Killer Among Us, pick 9. We are pretty locked in on Boros at this point, and this is not the kind of archetype that's going to do any splashing, sadly, so I'll take a second Chases on here. Now that we're fully locked in, I don't think we can speculate on the Killer Among Us. Take a Gearbane, Orangutan. Usually pretty bad, but every once in a blue moon you get to play this when your opponent has a big artifact creature on board, and then you just win the lottery. Alright, pack 3, pick 1, and we open up a fantastic rare for this kind of deck. 3 mana for 2/4 Flying Vigilance is already perfect, and it's got some extra value there. If your opponent has more cards in hand than you get to investigate during your upkeep. So you can get some clue tokens to draw some extra cards later. So really good for an aggressive deck that can dump out its hand quickly. So this incentivizes us to get a lower mana curve, try to play some really cheap cards like Felonious Rage over some of these 5 and 4 drops, just run some like really cheap combat tricks so we just dump the hand out and then keep investigating. So really good card, as is Makeshift Binding, but gotta take that Investigator first. Pack 3, pick 2, there is a Felonious Rage, fine little trick here. Fits into any curve really easily since it only costs 1 mana, but there is a Seasoned Consultant to make sure that we have more 2 mana creatures. There's also the really good flying threat of Granite Witness, so it's got some fierce competition. And I don't think it's particularly premium, it's just really nice that you can dump it out for so cheap and usually get a 2/2 out of it. Yeah, I mean, I like the card, but I am going to take Consultant over it here. Not that Consultant is great. Yet again, similar to the Red Herring here, it's not actually that good, but the fact that it is a 2-drop and it gets your curve started is quite nice. Now, Novice Inspector is great. Incredible value. Get your 1 mana 1/2, investigate, get your clue token. If you don't draw into a 2 mana play in your opening hand, then just immediately sack that clue turn 2 and get excellent value. Super sweet card, and that is why Novice Inspector is, I think, still the highest win rate common in the format. Really, really good card. Another Person of Interest, super happy with that. Join the party. Pick number 5, Galvanize, I'm quite happy with. Nice cheap removal. And we have a few clue tokens in here to be able to shoot something for 5 damage by sacking a clue during our turn. Cornered Crook is nice when you do have an artifact on board like a clue token to sack when you play it, but anytime that you don't, it's quite bad, a 5 mana 5/4. So I'm actually just going to take Fuss Bother here, which is just always good whenever you draw it. Like, unless you're really far on the defensive and you don't have 6 mana yet, that's like the one time it's not good, but that's quite unlikely in a pretty aggressive deck like this. Like, the only time we're going to end up on the defensive is when we're flooding out, in which case we can cast Bother. So I think it's pretty fine. Do not have enough detectives to care about Case of the Piltered Proof, and Caught Red-Handed is just way too much mana. They just made Active Treason 5 mana in this format for some reason. I guess the idea is you steal their creature and suspect it so that it has menace on your attack, and when you give it back, it can't block, but the best play pattern for Active Treasons, cards that temporarily steal your opponent's cards, is to just immediately lethal them with it. So the fact that you're giving it back with an inability to block doesn't really matter. Because most of the time, if you cast an Active Treason and you don't kill your opponent that turn, you are not having a good time. Alright, now we get to play a couple Felonious Rages. For a super low mana curve, we get another Chases on. We're going to have to cut some combination of these non-creature cards here, these combat tricks and stuff. But the deck looks pretty decent. We didn't end up with a single copy of On the Job, which I think looked fine at first because we don't have that much token production, but we did end up actually getting 1 Inside Source and 2 Person of Interest. So our deck's decent at getting a wide board state, decent enough that it could use like 1 copy of On the Job to give the whole board +2/+1. So I'm a little sad about that. That's the one thing I think we're really missing. But outside of that, the deck looks pretty good, and Fuss does a pretty good like mimicry of On the Job, giving your whole board a +1/+1 counter permanently. It's almost as impactful depending on how early you get to cast it. So yeah, I mean, deck looks solid. So we're sitting at 19 creatures, 10 non-creatures. Real simple way to do things, since we're an aggressive archetype, is to cut down to 17 creatures, 7 non-creatures. Something around those counts. So we get to cut a couple creatures here. Probably don't want this much top end, so we'll cut a Braggart, especially with 3 copies of Offender at large. That's like 3 more things we can do when we hit 5 mana. So I don't think we need Vigilante and Braggart, and I think Vigilante is better. Now we could cut a copy of Offender at large or Vigilante as well, so I'll put it in the maybe pile, but Braggart I think is an instant cut here for this deck. We also have quite a bit of 4 mana plays. Even if you treat the Night Watch as a disguise card we play on 3, we have so much stuff we're doing on 3 that we'll probably usually play a different 3-drop and then play this turn 4 still. So lots of 4 mana stuff, I think the weakest being the Griffknot Tracker. The Enter the Battlefield effect does not tend to matter that often, to where it's just a 4 mana 3/2 flyer, which is a bit below rate for modern limited standards. So I think we probably cut that 4-drop, and then out of the 3 mana plays, there are quite a few of these, especially when you consider the Offender at Larges and the Night Watch as potential 3 mana plays as well. So we can probably cut the more narrow Gearbane Orangutan or the Case File Auditor, seeing as we only got 1 enchantment to go with it. It's going to be a 3 mana 1/4, which doesn't really make any sense in this deck, unless it was actually consistently drawing makeshift bindings, then it would be fine. But it's not, so this looks pretty bad. Orangutan looks pretty bad, Tracker looks pretty bad. So let's see, if we leave the Offender at Larges in, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 3 mana plays. 7 if we count the Night Watch. Then there's 3 4-drops, 1 5-drop alongside Offenders to flip later. I imagine it is just like cut to 3 mana plays at this point. So cut those. And then 3 more cards to cut. We're sitting at 16 creatures now, so I did go a little cut happy here. Cut maybe 1 more creature than we need to. For non-creature cuts, we will cut some combination of combat tricks and almost definitely the knife. Just a little too much mana at equip 2 just for +1/+0 first strike. I mean, +1/+0 first strike is decent, but spending this much mana to not add additional bodies to the board is not the greatest till pretty late in the game. And at that point, +1/+0, even with first strike, might not be enough. So yeah, I'm just not going to play knife. And we could definitely cut a land with this deck. The problem is if we do cut a land, we don't actually have like a cheap creature to put back into the deck, which is what I would want to do. I'd want to put a 17th creature in here, and a 17th creature would be another 3 or 5 mana play, which would just be another card that wants more mana. And I actually don't think this deck looks terrible for 17 lands, even with a relatively aggressive curve, because again, when we hit a bunch of mana, we have 5 mana plays to flip up. There's 4 things we can do for 5 mana. We also have a 6 mana Bother if we're flooding out as well. We have a good amount of clue tokens between investigating with the chases on, the Novice Inspector, and like Red Herring can get sacked. So clue tokens are another way to spend our extra mana. So I think this is another 17 land kind of aggro deck. So let's go for cheap stuff on the curve, I think. Let's cut 2 chases on and leave 2 Felonious Rage to get that curve a little lower for the non-creature spells. It's a lot easier to fit the Felonious Rage into our curve. Felonious Rage is an interesting one, because it's less a combat trick and more like a 1 mana 2/2 that's pretty narrow. I don't know. I'm actually going to go 1 Rage double. What is it called again? Double Chases on? Because the Chases on is like genuinely a combat trick. Because of the first strike, anytime you cast the Chases on, you're trading the Chases on into their creature instead of your creature into their creature. And you're getting a clue token out of the interaction, so you do tend to be up a card there over time. But again, Felonious Rage, you're not giving any extra toughness to your card, so you're never having your creature just win the fight. It's still going to trade, but then you trade off and get a 2/2 Detective. So it's really just 1 mana for an instant speed 2/2 that you can only cast if one of your creatures is trading off this turn, so it is a bit narrow. But when it does fit into the curve perfectly, it's quite good. Like when you play a Red Herring turn 2, then they play a Disguise card, and then turn 3 you just attack into it with your Red Herring, and they are okay with making the trade because they're a more defensive deck, and you get to like Felonious Rage plus play your other 2 mana creature. Like those can be devastating curve outs where you're putting that much onto the board. But again, that is the Magical Christmas Land scenario that is a little narrow. So I don't know. The Chases on is also a little bit narrow because it has to be in position where you want to spend 3 mana on a combat trick, which is not every position. So some combination of Rages and Chases ons are definitely the last cut, but we'll do it this way. We'll do 1 Rage double Chase see how that functions for us, and call it a deck here. Alright, here's a look at the final deck list for today. We're on another Boros aggro pile. We've got a solid curve of creatures. We've got a little bit of spicy stuff going on, just with one nice rare with the Krenko Baron of Tin Street. I guess we have two nice rares now. The Wojak Investigator's the better card. This one's just insane. 3 mana, 2/4 flying vigilance, and it spits out clues without much work from you. The Krenko's the funner card that could be more explosive, so generally a lot of the time it's just going to be a 3 mana, 3/3 haste, which is still good. But when it pops off, it's going to be really cool, and we have a couple ways to get it to pop off. Just a couple clue tokens of our own that we can sacrifice and spit out goblins with. And obviously the best way to work is with the Investigator. If we get both of these out and we're constantly getting clues from the Investigator to make goblins, that's going to be super sweet. But the other thing it can do is if your opponent has a bunch of clue tokens they're trying to crack to stay in the game, if you hold up some red mana, you get to make a goblin every time your opponent loses their artifacts as well. So very cool, very fun card there. So those are the interesting, unique things going on with this deck. Other than that, it's your average general Boros aggro stuff. It's a good curve of creatures. It's multiple bodies off of one card with things like Person of Interest, Inside Source, even Museum Nightwatch to an extent since it trades off and replaces itself. So a lot of that kind of stuff to get a wide board state, to get around your opponent's blockers, find enough damage, some cheap removal like Shock, Galvanize, and Makeshift Binding, as well as some combat tricks to break through with a couple of the chases on. So all the general Boros aggro goodness here. Little bit more mediocre than our last Boros aggro deck. Our last Boros aggro deck was just the dream build, like the picture perfect, take a snapshot of this is what the archetype's trying to do deck. So I don't think we're going to repeat our 7-0 run this time around, but it still looks like a perfectly solid deck to be running here. And to make up for the slightly weaker synergies here, in having less go-wide stuff with less ways to make multiple bodies and less ways to buff our entire board, we're making up for that with a couple bomb rares with the Investigator and the Krenko that might be able to just pop off and single-handedly win some games. So we'll see how it all pans out for us as we head into the gameplay. Here we are for game one with a bit of an awkward hand. Our opponent is on the play and we're not playing anything till turn 3. So this is not really going to steamroll and be as aggressive as we want it to be. That said, it's got a Krenko in here with a clue token producer, which is potentially quite a strong start, so we're holding on to it for that. They start the game with a disguise card. Yeah, that's going to be a little annoying since that cannot be galvanized thanks to the ward, but it does mean our 3/3 haste gets to jam right past that and get some damage in immediately. Our opponent has a Lush Portico. Get to surveil one there, and they play another disguise card. They do attack. I was kind of hoping they wouldn't here, because then there's always the chance they double block and we galvanize one of the two. It would be unlikely, because most people would play around that, but who knows? It could be really good if we got there. I could hold up a galvanize, or I can just play this face down so that I can play a face-up Vigilante next turn and have as many creatures on board as possible. I think I'd rather do that. Really commit to the board here. Get some creatures down. Ooh, Sumala Sentry's terrifying. In the case of the Gateway Express to kill Krenko too. Oh, holding up Galvanize would have played so well there, but we couldn't have foreseen the case. Do I have to trade on blocks here? They're at 14. I don't think I do. That's a great draw. So we need to kill this before they flip anything up, because when they flip things up, they're getting a counter on this and a counter on the face down. So we're going to Galvanize the Sentry, and we're going to play Wojak Investigator in the same turn. Incredible draw for us, because otherwise the curve was going to be a little awkward here, where we really want to kill the Sentry, but if we do Galvanize the Sentry, we wouldn't have any other threats to play. So, very happy to draw the best 3-mana creature left in our deck at that point. Alright, sending the face down, no blocks. Okay. Imagine we Vigilante here. They're on red, green, white. They could have exile target attacking creature as their removal. They could try to flip a face-down flyer. There's the 5-mana 3/4 flyer. That could get flipped up. I imagine it's okay to try to put a counter on Investigator here. To play around the 3/4 flyer getting flipped up. But they could also just hit us with the exile target attacking creature. But that's an uncommon removal spell, so less likely than them having the common flyer face down. Alright, so they're just going to flip up a Night Watch, so we do just get 3 damage in. So that's nice. Got really big attacks next turn if they don't get some good blocks set up. Vigilante puts a counter on our face down, then we can flip it up as a 5/4. Their face down is just a Bloomkin. Alright, they don't have very good blocks set up. They've got a really good mana base. Grab a rare forest from the Bloomkin. Get the dual land there. Okay. So we have the 5-mana flip up or the 3-mana combat trick. We don't have both. We're 1 mana off from doing both, but this is still threatening a lot of damage. Cool. So I can only do one of the two. I can either the Chases on or I can flip up the face down. I can hit them for 6 in the sky, which is not lethal, so we just trade with Bloomkin and kill Night Watch with the flip. And that leaves me the mana to use my clue, which is kind of sweet. And they're down to 6. Alright. Well, if they don't deal with our flyer, or play their own flyer or reach creature, we can kill them with our combat trick now. But they do have a lot of cards to work with. 5 cards in hand still. Urgent Necropsy. Well, if the Investigator's gonna die anyway, then I may as well crack the clue. The only reason not to crack the clue would be to try to have less cards in hand than them. Ooh, top deck Offender at large? Not bad. The Flourishing Bloomkin. I can the Chases on to win that combat. And then I still have 5 mana up. And play a face-up Offender. And the Chases on. I imagine it's better to just cast the Chases on a face-down Offender and draw a card. Or even an Inside Source might be better than face-down Offender. It probably is. Get a wide board state. Alright. I guess a face-down Offender is more likely to randomly kill them. Ooh, that's not good for our opponent. That is extra good for me, though. Just wipe the board. I'm gonna get a wide board state here. I think we could play it either way, really. Try to get around their blockers, or just try to make one really big creature to surprise lethal them. Like they chump block Offender at large, but then this one gets in for 7. Always a possibility. But I will have 8 mana up next turn, so I can still surprise do the +2/+0 to whatever doesn't get blocked, which might be relevant. Really important to remember with this card, we cannot flip our cards up during their turn now. That is easy to forget. Easy to forget, because the card's good even without that text line. Person of Interest. That's a great draw. However, I need to be able to kill the Wojak Investigator if it blocks here, so I need to just play a face-down Offender at large, I think. Well, I guess I could Inside Source our Detective for 3 mana and then just play a face-up Offender, and that makes the Detective 6 power. They have to block both and lose their board. Yeah, that's better than playing the Offender face down and trying to trick kill the Investigator. Because this just guaranteed kills the Investigator. Yeah, there's the concession. They lose the whole board. we still have a 6-5, a 5-4, and a 1-1 on board after that. So we are 1-0 now, heading to game 2. Here we are for game 2. I cannot imagine one mountain, 3 white spells, 3 red spells is keepable, even on the draw. That is way too bold. If this was a Plains, because we have a Novice Inspector in hand, I might get greedy, but it's just a little too much risk for me. Alright, we've got our perfect mana curve here. Turn 1 and 2, we do Inspector things. Turn 3, we do Offender. Turn 4, we do Person of Interest. Our opponent has an incredible start as well, though. They have their own turn 1 Inspector, and they are on the play. Alright, mirror match with our opponent on the play. They are naturally advantaged here with the Shock to clear out Inspector now. That I'm actually really happy with. I generally almost never want to spend removal on a 1-2 that has already drawn our opponent a card by investigating. So if your opponent's in a position where they have to do that, you're like, alright. Feels like we got one over a little bit. Got a 2-for-1 on their Shock. Ripped the Shock out of their hand and drew a card. Pretty great stuff from Novice Inspector. Alright, if they're just holding 3 mana up here rather than playing anything, I think we play our face-down Offender or Museum Nightwatch rather than Krenko. Because there's chances for additional Shocks and Galvanize, and that would also explain why they were so willing to Shock so freely, is that they just have more removal quickly. I don't really want to Krenko and have it just get insta-galvanized. I guess it's really not the end of the world with this hand, but I'm just going to play a Disguise card. Nightwatch might have been better, since we can flip it sooner. It probably would have been. Should have been Nightwatch there. Over Offender at large. And they've got 4 mana now. The Drone Smith, they get a 1-1 flyer to poke us with every turn. Well, if they don't kill Krenko, I've got something real nice going on here. Because they're sacrificing an artifact every turn. So if they don't kill Krenko... Alright, I'm just going to make them have it. If they don't have the Krenko removal here, then this is an absolute nightmare for them. And honestly... I think it's worth the double attack. The only way they kill our face down is by blocking with Drone Smith, in which case we Felonious Rage. The only way they kill Krenko is by double blocking, in which case we Felonious Rage. And if they don't block at all, sweet. Show me the removal for Krenko or start giving me goblins. Well, there's the removal for Krenko. Alright. We tried. That would have been so sweet if they didn't have the removal here. Get a goblin every time they sack their Thopters. This is when it dies, right? Yeah, it dies. So the fact that it was exile removal is rough as well. We don't get our 2/2 detective. Yeah, and this only targets creatures we control, so I can't like target their Thopter so that when that dies, I create a 2/2. Yeah, so Felonious Rage is just stuck in hand now. That was sad. 5 mana, I can flip this up now. But I think we Person of Interest and get ready to Felonious Rage block somebody. Or we Museum Nightwatch, either way. It's fine. I think Person of Interest is a little better. That makeshift binding really showing off how good it is here. Life totals would be even if it weren't for the life gain from the binding, putting them ahead. Market Watch Phantom, which is going to get flying every single turn thanks to the Drone Smith. And another Novice Inspector. Excellent common. I was about to say, where's the clue? Where are the triggers? What's going on? Alright, hold up some blocks here, play around Felonious Rage. Real bad game for Felonious Rage. Making me want to play 3 Chases Ons and 0 Felonious Rages. Got the 5 mana to flip our face down and also hold up the Rage here. They have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 power on board and we're at 12? Alright. This feels profitable even without casting Rage. I could cast Rage instead of flipping. I could cast Rage and flip as well. Is that better than playing a Night Watch down? I imagine it is. Put them down to 8. Replace my 2/2 Menace with a 2/2. Clear out the board outside of the Drone Smith. There's a shock for our 2/2. This is +3, right? I was gonna say we might just lethal them if they attack with Drone Smith. But they had more removal. It is like all removal. 2 shocks, a binding, and a make your move. Okay, 3 mana to hold up Chases on. I imagine it is best to just dump onto the board and not go for any combat tricks, considering we can't block the flyer anyway, and this already kind of prevents them from attacking with Drone Smith. We just double block it with a 2/2 and a 1/1, and they just kill a 2/2. Meddling Youths, 4/5. They kill both our 2/2s if we block here. Send in the board, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage on board. They're just dead if they do that. Okay, they do send in with both, in which case they could still very well just be dead. This is 5 damage. They have played a land. They have played a land this turn, correct? That's what this Plains is about. So they're tapped out, dealing 4, 5, 6, 7 to me. I mean, I guess I could play it like slightly safe and do this and still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage. Yeah, just in case I'm really missing something that hits me for an extra damage here. This is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage, so I'll just do this. Now it's like extra safe. Yeah, I don't think I was missing anything. Oh, and now Red Herring. Just do that instead, and that's still lethal here. Alright. We are 2-0 heading into game number 3. Here we are for game 3 on the play. Time to see if our opponent's name is accurate. We are the first player this game. Are we the winner? Right. Seasoned Consultant. We're going to have to Elegant Parlor turn 4. But that'll fit pretty nicely into our curve. 2-drop, 3-drop, and then 3 mana of removal gets held up. And then we drop Offender at Large. I don't think we need to kill the Tipster right now, considering turn 3, usually they're just going to play a 3 mana 2/2 face down anyway. So they're not really going to get value out of the mana next turn. I guess maybe they have a really good 4 mana play, but it's much more likely that they're just playing a face down for 3 mana. Oh, 2 mana plays. Well, that does give them value, but we've also got perfect removal to just break on through here. It's a 5 mana flip. There is literally no reason to hold up Felonious Rage. Unless I want to rage something instead of shocking something. I guess that could be something. I mean, I think I'm just galvanized shocking here and then raging to trade up into whatever big thing they play. Okay, 2/2 red herring, that's fine. Case of the Trampled Garden. Okay, I guess it's much bigger than a 2/2, but it's still fine. It cannot block. We can certainly outrace it. Well, I mean, depending on our draws. A little bit depending on our draws. As long as we don't draw exclusively lands, we probably outrace a red herring. They need some good backup for it. So we'll see what they have to follow through. We have got them down to 8, but we are out of action. And there's Bite Down on Crime to kill our 5/4. Alright, a flyer. I generally don't recommend this. Uh-oh. Well, shoot. Oh no, it's the red herring. Never mind. I was gonna say, I generally don't recommend this, but I think we are in the exact position where we actually want to haste this. Because if we haste this, then we hit for 5, put them to 3, and they're dead in 1 flying attack. So they have 1 turn to find a way to kill the flyer. Instead of giving them 4 turns where I just hit them for 3 multiple turns in a row. So yeah, I'm hoping that Arena's just holding up this 2-mana crack ability for them, and they don't have a Shock or Galvanize in hand, because if they Shock or Galvanize in response to this, we're just dead. But if they don't, they have exactly 1 turn to find a way to kill the tracker, or they are dead. Do I need to hold up Consultant as a blocker? I mean, it's exact lethal in 2 swings without attacking with Consultant, so I think I might as well. I don't think putting them to 2 is any more helpful. I guess there is 1 shock in this deck, but we already cast it, so... Yeah, I think it's just put them to 3, and just try to get Tracker in. Well, that didn't work out for us. Still think it was right, though. They only had 1 card in hand. They needed to immediately have the removal for Tracker, or they were losing this game. The immediate removal for Tracker was the 1 card in their hand, though. Or it was their top deck. There's no way to know, really. Only card in their hand right now is their top deck. They need to have a top deck to combat trick to kill us. I think we block here and try to go wide for the kill. It's another creature. I have to draw a combat trick to kill them, but any combat trick does kill them, and we just flood out. Unfortunate. Yeah, I think I played that out basically as well as we could have. I don't think there was anything we could do there. It's too much flood. I am dead on board, right? Yes, technically not. No, I am, because this gives +1/+1 trample. Yeah. Alright. 2-1, heading into game 4. Here we are for game 4 on the draw. Pretty average hand. We will keep it. Playing against green-white. Uh-oh. An insane 2-drop of the Neighborhood Guardian. Don't mind just galvanizing this on the draw, but I also really like Consultant into Inside Source as our 2- and 3-drop curve now that we drew that. Trying to flip the aggro in our favor. We'll see how this plays out. I am going to try to do Consultant into Inside Source here. But I could definitely see the argument for just insta-galvanizing that Guardian. Sample Collector is also pretty bad for us from an aggressive deck. They have enough mana value in Grave, they start buffing up the board pretty well. Alright, well, one of these is going to hit me for 3 again this turn, but I think I'm going to be able to block one here. Unless they play their own Inside Source, basically. Buff both of them. But I suppose if that's the case, I can just trade a 2/2 token into Neighborhood Guardian. They attack in with that as a 3/3. Novice Inspector, incredible card. Buff the Neighborhood Guardian. Set in with just the Guardian. I can trade a 2/2 into it, but if they have the green combat trick, that's a nightmare. Plus, if I keep the board state wide, we have great consultant attacks coming up with combat tricks alongside them. So I think I'm going full race with 2 removal spells in hand, one of which gains me life. I think we are jamming on in here. And then turn 5 playing 2 removal spells. Sure. Chase is on the sample collector. Oh, they have the +3/+3? They do. Well, that was going to demolish us on attacks or blocks at some point here. That would have completely ruined our Galvanize also. Yeah, we actually would have been... literally needed to see the future to win this game, I guess, because... if we try to make any blocks, we lose to get a leg up. If we try to make any attacks, we lose to get a leg up. If we try to galvanize something, we lose to get a leg up. The only way we win this game is if I know that they have exactly that in hand and we make shift binding and then play around it hard. Not the only way we win this game, but the only way that we don't get demolished by this card and fall extremely behind. Yeah, that's rough. That is insane. Oh, again, we still haven't like instantly lost here, but that thing was gonna be real hard to beat. So we go 4/4 and 2/4 on blocks as our best way to stop some damage. Oof. Busted uncommon strikes. That's makeshift binding plus mana ramp instead of life gain. Card is wild. Actually, it's even better than makeshift binding because it's any non-land permanent instead of just creatures. Here's the 2 mana +3/+3 trample trick and the concession. Well, it's not the trample one. It is still basically the concession, but... wow. Yeah, this has not been a super fun game. They're down to 2 1-power creatures. Maybe we can win a top deck war if we're lucky, but they still have 2 more non-lands in their hand because they didn't play their 5th land yet. So they also just have drawn more gas than us. Versus lands. More non-land spells, I should say. Should specify. More Novice Inspectors. Play 1 blocker. I guess I play the blocker that lets me draw a card. In the same turn. I guess I should have done this first in case we drew a better 4 mana or less play. Yeah, that would have been a little better. Because I only play 1 blocker either way, and trading this off at least gives me another blocker. Now we get crushed by whatever this face down is. Could be almost any face down and it will destroy us. Oh my god, their deck is literally entirely combat tricks. Well, we definitely didn't play that out correctly. Certainly played it out really poorly in hindsight when we got to see exactly what was in their hand. Like, if we had perfect information of what was in their hand, then we played really badly. But with the information we had at the time, we didn't play it out right, but we didn't play it horrifically. I think the Seasoned Consultant attack was actually pretty bad, even if we didn't expect the combat trick from them. We probably should have done just the full defensive Galvanize plays, but even then, This kind of deck just completely destroys all our removal spells. Yeah, I mean, what can he do? They really just got us there. They had double Inspector as well to never run out of gas, and they drew less lands than us. Doesn't seem winnable, but it was not played particularly well. So a bummer in every sense of the word as we head into Game 5. Any land gets us to Wojek Investigator, so we're going to keep this and hope to draw any land in the first 3 draw steps. We are running 17, so it shouldn't be that difficult, and we do draw perfectly and find the red source. Turn 1. Another green-white deck. I am already having horror flashbacks to last game. But we are on the play this time. I don't think we were on the play last game, but I could be wrong. No, we weren't, because they had the Unicorn turn 2 when I was still playing 2-mana blockers. They were buffing the Unicorn and jamming right past them. Yeah, that was also a pretty big downside. Pretty big fault in what happened last game. But honestly, I mean, the stack of tricks they had there with so many cheap creatures is like, even if they were on the draw, I think we were just mega crushed. Alright, traded our red herring up into a 4/3 flyer. It would have cost them a lot of mana to flip that, so they do get to use that to prevent a good chunk of damage. But it does still feel like decent work from the red herring. Our opponent is on green, white, and black. Here's an Extract a Confession to kill our bomb rare. That's rough. Great draw here, getting to play Person of Interest instead of a face-down Offender at large. I will absolutely do that. Even if it means I don't play Offender at large face-up next turn, I can play it face-down and hold up Felonious Rage. And I can do that post-combat while holding up the Chases on for the attack. So we've got great 4-mana things to do the turn after this. Now I could just cast the Offender. I imagine we are committing to the board as much as possible here. Getting all this damage in. No, we actually do trade our 2/2 up into the Eavesdropper. That's fine too. Opponent's a tiny bit stuck on mana here, but we're a tiny bit flooded, so I think it balances out. Shock is actually a good draw. Unfortunate, no value from the Surveil. Wish the Mountain and the Shock were in the other order, so we'd have the Shock now and then Surveil the Mountain to the grave. Alright, I mean, we are the aggro deck, we keep jamming. Down to 9. It might have been worth it to the Chases on. I don't think it was worth it to Felonious Rage, but maybe just get 3 damage in and then crack our clue during their end step. Keep doing our thing. Okay. Currently, this is fine. Show me your trick, and then I'll show you mine. Fanatical Strength to Tipster? Sure. If I first strike up my Offender, then what do you do? Show me the second trick, and then I'll show you mine. Second trick is flipping that up for some lifelink on blocks. Okay. And now I can just shock the Savior. Rather than Felonious Rage. I mean, I could do that too, but if I shock, I keep a 2/2 Menace instead of a 2/2 without Menace, and I'd rather have a 2/2 Menace here. Alright. Well, that looks pretty good for me all around. Find a seasoned consultant, so we do have one more threat that we can haste out as well with Felonious Rage. If we're getting anywhere close to lethal, it might be worth it. Uh-oh. This thing was terrifying. I've only played against it once, so I forgot what it does. When it attacks, exile a card from their grave, then investigate. When they sack a clue, make it a copy of a creature exiled with it. So they have to attack to use it, but they could make it a lifelinker, which is a big deal. But it's kind of hard for them to attack right now, so... yeah, I mean, they're not in a great position to attack. It's probably fine. I imagine we just attack in, and we Felonious Rage if they double block person. They can't kill Offender at all. I don't think there's a reason to Consultant and haste it. It'd be a 5-power attacker. So if both of these got in, they'd be dead, but... maybe it actually is worth the haste. They have to trump one of the 5/4s at that point. This would be only 3 toughness, so they could double block it. I only kill one of their cards, and then I get the detective. But yeah, then I get the detective if they block it. Sure. They have to block one of these two, which means they have to chump with the Strider, or they have to double block to get a kill. But if they do get a kill, the only thing they can kill is Consultant, and if they kill Consultant, we get a 2/2 out of the deal anyway. Okay, well that looks pretty profitable to me. Put them to 3, replace it with our 2/2, and pass. Locks it on Eavesdropper for a 3/3 blocker, only dealing 2 to them on board. So they're still in it, and we are flooding. They have to chump their... I guess they get double block here, actually, to kill this. If I only send in these 2, they can double block and kill the 5/4. If I send in all 3, they kill the 2/2, chump, and take 2. I think I let them kill the 2/2 so that they can't double block and kill the 5/4. Well... yikes, that's an insane draw here. And so is that. Alright. It's definitely safer to play Bother, but Fuss ends the game immediately, so I'm just going to do that. They only have 1 white mana up. I don't think there's anything they could have to interact there. But just in case, it's probably better to Bother. Get 3 1/1 flyers and Surveil. Close game. Was really worried about just flooding out of that one, because we were finding a good land chunk at the end, but do find the Fuss probably the last opportunity to do so before they completely stabilize there, so pretty happy with that. We are now 3-2, at least a 50-50 run here, but we'll see if we can't win another game or two and get in the money or break even on gems. Here we are on the play for game number 6? Yeah, game number 6 with a horrible hand mana-wise. We hit no mountains and we do nothing the entire game, basically. Yeah, I mean, that's just a mole. Okay, this is much better. We will drop... Have any double white in the deck? I've got 1 double white card and no double red, so we'll drop a mountain. And here we go. I'll be red herring first. Neighborhood Guardian. Well, I've got the 5 mana I need to get to Vigilantes, so we might actually just be ripping a new hand out of the deck with the Codebreaker here. Yeah, let's play towards that. Ooh, they do trade here. I guess they're green, white, black, so they're probably not the most aggressive unicorn deck, but Usually I'd be incredibly happy to trade into that with a red herring. Okay, well, I'm happy to have some card draw potentially, because these draws are quite bad. Come on into my face. Down to 18. This does mean if they have any removal to throw at a disguise card, they're going to do it, because they know I care about it. They don't do it here. Yep, that is full flood. Alright, board wipe us, and now I don't get to do my draw spell. At least they only board wipe 2 cards. Not the complete end of the world, but I am very tired of getting board wiped. Ooh, let's go. Wojak Investigator actually potentially insane if they don't have removal in hand, but they probably do. We'll see. Face down card, they've got 1 mana up. Krovod Haunch, no removal. Investigator goes to town. Oh my god, we're still in this game. We are still very in this game. Crack a clue. Find Elegant Parlor. Absolutely, that is the land for turn. Mill the flood away. Crack a clue. Find Felonious Rage. Jam in for 2 and drop Consultants. They need to dump their hand out. To stop us from drawing a card. And they're stuck on mana, so I don't think they can. Yeah, they still have 3 cards in hand, so we do get the card. Sick. Let's crack the clue. Fuss Bother. Ooh, either halves of this card's pretty nuts. I guess we just bother in this position, though, because our ground attacks aren't great. Multiple 2/2s on their board. Galvanized Chase is on. I don't dislike either of these. The board stayed this wide. I think we can afford to draw another combat trick, especially because it draws us a card when we play it. We've got more than enough mana to play this and crack the clue. Let's draw both. Do Galvanize first, since I already have a pseudo combat trick in hand. Wow, our opponent is really stuck on mana. That is not great for them. It just, they still haven't hit land 5. I mean, I've not been a fan of the amount of lands that I am drawing, but we are in a way better position thanks to the Wojak Investigator drawing us so many extra cards. Like, it's quite nice actually in the end that we had this much mana, since they just have not drawn into removal for the Investigator, and they haven't drawn into the lands to dump their hand out quickly enough. Guess I might as well have the chases on in hand as an option. Public Thoroughfare. They found land 5, but it hits the board tapped. Now they pass turn. I'm going to attempt to galvanize this. Worst case scenario, they flip it up, it survives, but we get to know what it is. Best case scenario, it dies and then they die because they don't have any blockers. Alright, well that works. It does survive, but I think they die still. Yeah, I mean, they're going to concede anyway. So they block one of our creatures, take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, exact lethal with our +3/+0 trick. So I guess we do get there in the end. Weird game. Did not start super great with us. A lot of flood. They got rid of our card draw spell. Our card that lets us discard our hand and draw 3. But then they really got stuck on mana there, which was a huge bummer for them. And we drew our best card in the deck. We drew our card draw engine and it just popped off. Because that card is ridiculous when your opponent is stuck on mana, so they just can't dump their hand out and they can't stop you from investigating. So kind of awkward, little unlucky in the start, but then super lucky in the end. Not even that we got insanely lucky with our draws, just that our opponent got ridiculously unlucky with theirs. So 4 and 2 it is. Lots of variance there for sure, but it does let the roulette wheel spin in our favor as we head into game number 7. We are on the play with no red source. Mulligan that. This is keepable. Detective into inside source is super sweet. Let's do it. These cards don't really synergize together that much. They're just both good cards. I mean, it is a detective, so I could buff it with inside source, which I guess is something. I'm mainly just saying we have a really good 2 mana play, really good 3 mana play. Get rolling quite well, and Galvanize is very good with the Reckless Detective. Because we don't have to sacrifice any clues to have drawn a second card during our turn. It's just straight up 5 damage during our turn if we need it to be. Alright, let's send on in. Ditch Mountain 2 to draw a card, I think. Cool. And drop an inside source. Reasonable doubt. Alright, we don't drop an inside source. They choose not to suspect the Reckless Detective. Fair enough. Probably wouldn't be great to give us menace. They are blue, red, and white, so probably pretty controlling over there, and we are down in cards thanks to the mulligan, so they have some good 2-for-1 removal. They could really come ahead here, especially if they have a board wipe. But if they have a kill a creature, yep. If they have that stupid card, the kill a creature and investigate, that'll also put them pretty far ahead in cards. Person of Interest, actually like the perfect draw. Something to jam out for the exact 4 mana that we have. If we don't hit land 5 next turn, it'll look a little sad that we ditched a land to draw a card with Reckless Detective, but if we didn't ditch a card to Reckless Detective, then it wouldn't have hit for any damage. It doesn't get the +2/+0 unless you discard the card, so we didn't really have a choice there. Alright, and we did just perfectly hit the mana here. Do I play around a second Reasonable Doubt? Or do I just hardcast it main phase 1? This could be wrong, but I'm going to play around the Reasonable Doubt here and just hit for 4. And this also gets them to maybe tap out their mana during our combat to kill something. That is actually insane against tokens. 2 mana instant, destroy target creature, surveil 1. Seems strong. Alright, so we can still get Offender at Large's Summoning Sickness out of the way at least. And this way it has Ward, so they can't just 1-for-1 removal spell it as easily. They'll have to spend extra mana to do so. But yeah, I mean, they are far ahead. They're 4 cards ahead right now. Actually, no, we've got 3 cards. Person of Interest, Face Down, and Galvanize. They're 3 cards ahead. Okay, there's their Face Down. Case of the Filched Falcon, which draws them another card later in the game off of that clue token. Alright, let's jam on in. Imagine we just hit for damage here. Whether or not they block, we flip. Because the only other option is just hold up a Galvanize to kill 1 Face Down. Just poke them for only 4 damage. If they do block, I think we're slightly happier. Not massively happier, because that would have been super cool just hitting them for a bunch, but this does mean we kill their creature without losing any of our own, which is kind of sweet too. Helps us narrow the gap in card advantage. Novice Inspector is the draw. It can't be a 4-power face down, so we should be able to attack into any face down here with only 2 mana up from them. I do have a backup Galvanize if something really weird happens. I mean, that works. 2 cards in their hand. Let's Galvanize this thing. Before they can flip it. Make it too big to Galvanize. Oh, it still would have been small enough to Galvanize even flipped. But we probably would have Galvanized that post-flip anyway. The 4/3 flyer. Alright, Novice Inspector is yet another card that helps us narrow that gap. It's a threat to put on the board that also draws us a card. Ooh, 2/5 hexproof. That means the Novice Inspector doesn't really do any attacking, but still drew us this card to dig for more threats. Crime Stopper Sprites. Collect the evidence to lock down the person of interest for a turn. Well, here's another one. 7 mana. I have enough to pay for the counter unless I pay 3, which is the most taxing counterspell in the format. Outside of the blue-green X mana counterspell, but they're not on green. So I don't need to play the land. Jaded Analyst, just more cards to trade off on blocks. This Living Conundrum is actually just the biggest deal out of everything they've played. A 5 toughness blocker that also has hexproof. Ooh. That's a fresh hand. We've got the mana to flip it instantly, but I'm not even attacking if I flip it instantly. I think we just flip it in their end step. Like, why not? Yeah. I don't think we attack in here. I mean, they only have 3 blockers, so if I attack with both menace cards, one of them hits them for 2, and the other one does trade into a 2 toughness card. Right, they block with a Conundrum and one of their 2 toughness cards. I don't think the blocks are terrible for us, but I am going to hold off for a turn, considering I'm going to have 4 cards in hand next turn to choose from. Quite likely, out of 4 cards drawn, to find something like a combat trick that will make our attacks incredibly profitable next turn instead, if I just keep all these creatures on board. So 4 cards drawn is quite a lot here. Alright. So draw 3 now, and then draw 1 during the draw step. Get a Night Watch and an Offender at Large. So Offender at Large is sort of a combat trick, but it costs me 8 mana to use it as a combat trick instead of just hard casting it. Might still be worth it. It's only +2/+0 though, so it's not a big enough combat trick to kill Living Conundrum. But with 2 menace cards, I mean, they go block, block, block on the non-menace. Take 4, go to 4. I'm gonna play it face down, and we'll see if the blocks are in a spot where it is profitable to flip, and if they're not, then we'll just play Night Watch for bigger attacks next turn. On board, we're hitting for 4 here, putting them to 4 life. We are losing 1... We're losing 2 creatures without trading if they block correctly. But if they do block like that, then we can flip the face down to make sure Novice Inspector trades up as well. So realistically speaking here, if they do not have like instant speed removal or combat tricks in hand, we're losing 1 creature to Living Conundrum and trading 2 creatures off, which is fine. Okay, so since they do block in this way, I think maybe I should flip up so that Novice Inspector does trade into the Sprite. At the same time, we're putting them down to 4, and the surprise extra 2 damage might be worth not flipping up right now so that we have the surprise damage later. Plus, we'll have another attacker out next turn if I wait. You know what? I'm still going to wait here. At the very least, we get to see what they're doing, if they're playing their own trick. And it looks like they are. Auspicious Arrival? Sure. So now do I want to flip? Because now they're losing 0 creatures here. They're still taking 4 and going to 4 life, which means a single 2-power creature gets in and they're dead. I don't think I'm actually flipping. I just need to sneak in 2 damage now. So just a single creature gets through, and they might be dead. That's actually a phenomenal draw. Okay, on board, they're already just dead. They go block, block, and then they can't block Menace and take 4 and die. So we'll just present the onboard lethal and then use all of our tricks to make sure that it follows through. They are currently on the take 4, go to 0 game plan, so I will say okay to that. There's a shock for our person of interest. So we flip up our Offender to make our creature that broke through 4 power. It might be better to have just waited and then gone for the post-damage shock instead of representing lethal here. Even if we don't kill them this turn now, we are killing them the thing. Is this destroy an artifact and Shamrock creature with power greater? Wow! So yeah, if we went for the post-combat shock, they would have just died, because it's exactly 4 power removal. Okay, wait for them to pay for the ward. Okay, they've paid for the ward. Now we flip, so we still get a 2/2 off of this. And then... no reason to pre-combat shock. It's the same outcome either way. We kill both those cards, so we just resolve all this. Okay. God dang, makeshift binding is so good. End step shock. No shot. Oh my god. Played around the frickin' counter unless they pay 3 thing all game until that exact moment, and they had it. God dang it. Yeah, I should have waited till we had our mana up. Well, now they have to top deck. They've got one... Never mind. I could top deck instead, and then they just die. I was gonna say they have to top deck or they are dead. They have one more turn to draw a blocker. And then we drew a combat trick, so they did not have one more turn to draw a blocker. Alright, things got real awkward in the end there. It probably would have been best. Obviously, in hindsight, but even with the information we had at the time, it would have been best to let the damage through and then go for the shock, rather than presenting onboard lethal. It is harder for them to play around us, shocking them in the face for the final 2 damage, than it is for them to play around a 4 power creature that is not blocked. Because if you see a 4 power creature that's not blocked, you know, okay, I have to kill that or I'm dead. But if you see a 2 power creature that's not blocked and you're at 4, there's no way to confirm your opponent has the shock in hand, so we should have went for it that way. Used our hidden information to try to kill them. And would have been a much less risky end game in that case. And then also, obviously, I don't think there was a reason to shock end step, actually. We should have just waited till we were on tap. We have so much mana, we could play anything else we drew into and the shock in the same turn, and that way we would play around the counter unless we pay 3. So that was loose as well. Luckily, we do outdraw them in the end, but it was certainly closer than it needed to be. So we are 5-2 now, I think, in the money here. Or are we 4-2, breaking even? We are 5-2. Let's go. All right, great draft in the money, leaving with more gems than it costs to enter. Awesome place to be, and see how far we can take it as we head into game number 8. Here we are for game 8 with a sweet hand. We are on the draw, though. But Detective into Inside Source is going to be awesome. Seasoned Consultant into Inside Source is fun, too, but if anything happens to any of our creatures, Consultant just sits there as a 1/3, which is not very appealing. Detective is just a standalone great card, no matter what happens to the rest of our board. As is Fugitive Codebreaker. This might be a hand that wants to just jam it out when we've got a Fuss Bother for a huge prowess attack later. Ooh, boy. And they have a Kellen. They get to play Kellen next turn? My lord. 3/4 flying Vigilance, too. Vigilant. Alright, well, we need to jam this game. This will not be a long one with the way that our hand looks against a Kellen. A Kellen is just going to eat us up. If we play it slow here. They do not jam out the Kellen, though. They go for a face down. Oh, because they've got 1 mana removal? Gross. Alright, well. Top deck the removal for Kellen, and now the game plan does go to playing a perfectly fine long game. Just drop an Inside Source. And we're just gonna makeshift binding a Kellen and go from there. They do have the 5 mana up to flip up something like a Crocodile. That would be a 5/5, so I don't think we can afford to attempt to block their face down if they attack here. Okay, well now we literally can't. If they Crime Stopper Sprite. I don't know why they're so conservative with the Kellen here. It's incredibly revealed. So, like, if I have removal for it, I'm going to save the removal for it. I guess this way they get damage in this turn. Guess once we see what the face down is, that'll explain it. Coveted Falcon? They're going to give us their lands and then steal them back with the Falcon? I guess they just give us 1, draw a card, hit us, take it back. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Alright, well that explains that. That curves out perfectly, gives them a little bit of extra value there. We just drop Consultant and Detective this turn. Cool. Next turn, makeshift binding a Kellen and swing on in. And we're likely actually casting Fuss here for +1/+1 to everybody permanently. So we probably start ditching lands to Reckless Detective. I'm not casting Fuss next turn, but definitely in the future. It's another hard-hitting question. It is. Oh yeah, they've got very good green removal. Some premium green removal. Well, here's premium white removal. Pull the red source up because I can just play in other planes if I need. If I top deck a white card. Come on in, team. We outraced them on board, so I'm pretty happy with the current state of things. We outraced them on board, and we have a Fuss in our hand, which is wild. Plus this Offender at Large to just cast next turn now. We've got the 5 mana out. Just hard cast this. If I top deck a 6th land, I could play this face down and cast Fuss. Which would be super bonkers. Alright, 3 mana for whatever they drew here. Face down card. Greetings. Welcome. Land 6 is beautiful, but I do think I have to ditch it so that I can buff my Reckless Detective on the attack here. Attacking with 2 2-power creatures. I guess I could just not hold up Fuss Bother, and that's probably fine. Yeah. I kind of wanted to attack, discard this, hold up Fuss, but if I do this, then I buff Inside Source, and I actually... Well, no, if I buff Inside Source, they block it with Falcon. But then both of these get in, so it's probably fine. Guess I could buff Reckless Detective. Because that one would just bounce off Falcon otherwise. Now this bounces off. Yeah, I guess I just buff one of these two. Trade into the face down or bounce off Falcon. Sure. Oh, that's rude. Granite Witness. Would you like to trade? No. Like, no thanks. I'm gonna hold this in hand. We might just ditch it to the detective, because, again, Fuss is looking quite strong as a trick. Now, also just playing land 6 and casting Bother looks good. This card's just great. Fuss and Bother. Phenomenal Magic card. It's a pretty fantastic draw. Oh, wait, never mind. I was going to say that's a pretty fantastic draw because it's usually a 2-4 and they gain some life, but they actually don't have the evidence left, so it's just okay here. Alright, I would love to draw land, but I do need to sack something to Detective to buff it here. Let's just jam, see how much Fuss value we get. If I hit another land, beautiful. I get to play Investigator and Fuss. If I don't, that's a little sad, but I get to Fuss and play Novice Inspector instead now. Which is still good. Alright, that'll be a trade. Those will bounce off. And that'll be a chump. Looks fine to me. Actually, if this is the block, I'm not going to cast it. I'm just going to let the 1/1 die to the Coveted Falcon and just play Investigator and Inspector. And still have that Fuss Bother for later. Because we're only making one of those blocks any better for us by casting Fuss. Oh, Red Herring into Fuss. Huge. Big damage. Big damage. Free crack of the clue from the detective. And here we go for what is quite likely lethal. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I mean, they're going to 1, so that'll definitely do it. That is going to be 6 and 2. We are heading all the way into the final boss with this deck. So we're going to play all 9 games of Magic. Next game is our last game, win or lose, the final battle. Alright, here we are for the final boss. We're on the play with 2 3-mana bombs. No 2-mana creatures, so it's not going to be the perfect curve that's like unbeatable or anything. They can still definitely just have some cheap removal spells and then win the long game easily. But I think it's a pretty solid start. Playing against a green deck. There's a 4-drop now, so we go 3 into 4. Double green now. There's a Flourishing Bloomkin as a 2/2 on the ground. Could just galvanize that, but I think I'm going to cash in early damage immediately. Galvanize it next turn if it becomes a 3/3. I could also just Chases on, and that'll kill it and give me a artifact to work with Krenko's ability, which could definitely be profitable. Alright, it is going to be a 3/3. Oh, they're going to attack in. Alright, well, we don't have to galvanize it then. Although this would be our last opportunity to know that it's only going to be a 3/3. Because they could always play a 4th for us next turn. They might have succeeded at the full mono green, which would be wild. It's unlikely, but it's possible. I imagine I still have to just race, though, when they offer me good attacks. Yeah, they're just gonna give me a chump here. Yeah, chump with a Rift Burst Hellion, let's go. Uh-oh, that is a hybrid card that they can play off mono green, so this might be the mono green Bloomkin deck. Which is threatening, but I do believe we outrace that deck, so I'm gonna drop Person of Interest here. Looking to hit a 5th land, we can Investigator plus Galvanize in the same turn, or if we don't need to Galvanize, we just hardcast an Offender. Either of those are great plays. Yeah, we can just Galvanize their other threats. We can outrace 1 Bloomkin. Bite down on crime, kill the Krenko. Buff the Bloomkin. Now it is a little harder to outrace. 6 damage to me. Oh! I am tremendously happy with the decision to not attack there. And I'm tremendously happy with that draw, giving me a full 6 damage swing this turn. Boom. Incredible turn cycle for us. There's another face down on the defensive here. Find a Reckless Detective. And just hold up a Chases on, see if we need to do that anywhere. And then drop a Detective if we want another threat, or Galvanize if we want to burn something out. Honestly, I think these trades look fine to me. Don't mind this at all. I don't think I need to Combat Trick there. Let's go Investigator. Detective. There is no mono green board wipe, so I'm not playing around the Wrath. Every card we've seen is green, so... There's a face down card. We do get to investigate. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage if I kill this thing and Chases on. But I don't have the mana to do that. It's 4 mana to Galvanize and 3 to Chases on. I'm 1 mana off. So let's just send in... Crack the Clue for free. Find a Red Herring. Dang, that actually would have been lethal if I just pre-combat Crack the Clue and then cast the Red Herring. Oh wait, no it wouldn't. I still wouldn't have had the mana. It would have been a 2 to use the Clue, 2 to play the Herring, and I still wouldn't have had 3 mana up for the Chases on. They do not have a good block here, so they might just let it through, in which case we can attempt lethal. Alright, I don't think there's a lot of instant speed green removal, so let's try. And it looks like we get there. Alright, kind of just a classic little Boros aggro steamroll there for the final victory, and it's going to be another trophy run, 7-2 from this deck. Final look at the deck before we log off for the night. Let's check out our under and over performers here. I think everything did its job pretty well, but Felonious Rage was definitely a bit of an underperformer. We had it quite frequently in those early games, and it was a little awkward finding the instances to be able to actually use it, trading off, getting our detective tokens. We did get to use it for the haste a couple times, but I think we lost both games where we went for that. Like the one game where we got to hit our 8 life opponent for 5 damage with the hasty flying tracker. That way, if they didn't have removal, we'd kill them in one more turn, hitting them for the final 3 on the next turn, but then they just like had the removal, so that played pretty poorly for us. And there was a play where we Felonious Raged a Seasoned Consultant. That one actually went really well because their only profitable block there was to double block the Consultant to kill it. So because we hasted it out with Felonious Rage and they did go for the kill, we actually also got the detective value. So getting the haste value plus the detective value was pretty sick. So it overperformed in that game, but there were a couple other games where it was just stuck in our hand the whole time, or we just like hasted out a Griffknot tracker and died anyway. So it's probably the biggest underperformer. Didn't love it. I actually was super happy with the chases on the whole time, so I don't know if I'd want to do 3 chases on and 0 Felonious Rage, because having variety is nice, it is good. Not just clump up with all the same kind of combat trick, but I genuinely do think this is just a better card than Felonious Rage usually. Now, when you do have the perfect dream curves and you are trading off and you've got only 1 mana left, Felonious Rage can be better in those exact positions, but they just come up a lot less frequently is what it is. So that was the biggest the biggest underperformer. For the biggest overperformer, I was pretty happy with how everything performed. I don't think anything really did insanely well or way better than I thought it would. I guess, I mean, Offender at Larges were pivotal in the vast majority of those victories, getting the extra damage to swing in. Like, even our last game there, just playing Offender at Large to make it so our 2-2 could attack into their 4-4 blocker by attacking as a 4-2. That found 4 additional damage, which was huge at making it really hard for them to stabilize. And there were tons of games with very similar lines coming from Offender at Large, so I, again, don't know if I'd call it an overperformer because I'm already pretty high on the card. Seems like I'm higher than the general populace on the card with how many copies I'm always able to get for these kind of decks, but it continues to be probably the sweetest thing to top your curve off with at 5 mana for these kind of Boros decks. The flexibility of being able to jam something on board to attack and block with on turn 3, but also have the good 5-drop finisher is sweet, and that +2/+0 trigger, like most little buff effects, ends up stacking into a lot more damage than it looks like, so big fan of Offender at Large. That will get the overperformer reward. But that is going to end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and YouTube members for their support, as well as you for watching the video. If you enjoyed this video and are interested in seeing more like it, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you some more in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.